感が5位。
お、じゃあ、おい。
Hello and welcome to Boxing Tonight, Mirror Fighting's look ahead to this evening's fight. I'm Martin Drummond, joined by Rich Jones. Please do give the video a thumbs up, do subscribe to our channel. It is Friday, you're not hearing things. We do have World Championship Boxing this evening. Billy Joe Saunders defends his WBO super middleweight title against the perennial bridesmaid in world title fights, Martin Murray. Rich, I feel like so much of this fight is really about which Billy Joe Saunders shows up. He's had two fights at 168 pounds, one to win the vacant belt in Stevenage, one to then defend it in LA. Some contrast there last year. But he hasn't looked good in either fight. Now, that may just have been because the opponents weren't particularly great. Or it may be that he just, he couldn't get himself up for it. Or there may be something more to it. Maybe 168 is just not for him. But if he is on his game tonight, if he is the best Billy Joe Saunders that we've only seen in flashes, this could be a comfortable night for him.
Yeah, it should be. And I think, like you say, when we've seen him at his best, I think that performance where he won away from home against Lemieux, which I think was almost 3 years ago exactly, that was probably, one of the most complete British boxing performances we've seen away from home for a long time. He just completely dominated pretty much every minute of every round on that occasion. But like you say, he hasn't looked at his best in the last two fights since he's moved up. And yeah, I think it's getting to the point where he kind of needs to put on a show. We say about whether he's not up for it or whether he doesn't suit the weight, but like it's getting to the point where he needs to sort of put on a bit of a show and sort of remind everyone just how good he is. Because like you say, we've seen how good he is in flashes, but those flashes are sort of looking further and further away now. So it's kind of, he talks about wanting the big fights. I know Eddie Hearn says he was very close to getting the Canelo fight before COVID hit. And yeah, now's the time where he needs to sort of really kind of stamp his authority on the fact that he deserves one of these huge fights up next. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Martin Murray obviously really experienced. He's going to be a tough customer. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what we get from Billy Joe Saunders.
You mentioned the Canelo fight, and it was seemingly days away from being signed and sealed, and then coronavirus struck. So this fight really shouldn't have happened. It was supposed to happen 2 years ago, twice. Billy Joe Saunders pulled out, but this year it was never supposed to happen. So, and then what did get made, I think it was just a couple of months ago, it was finally done. So Billy Joe hasn't had a long time to prepare, and it's not the fight that he wanted. Let's be honest, he wanted Canelo. He's now going to fight Callum Smith. He would have wanted several names, Golovkin, Andrade, etc., before Martin Murray. So he did make weight. I don't think that was ever an issue because he's really a middleweight. I still think he should be a middleweight, and arguably so is Martin Murray. So he's made weight, but there's definitely a possibility that he's just not 100% there. Whether that's enough, because Martin Murray has to be at his best. He's now 38 and he's been going for a long time. Whether that's enough to make it a really close fight, I don't know, but there are definitely question marks around Billy Joe Saunders and whether or not it just might be that his natural talent takes him through in the end.
Yeah, I think it has done in the past, doesn't it? His natural talent's obviously been enough to get him some wins when he hasn't come in the best shape or the most prepared. And yeah, you'd think he's, like you say, he's such a naturally gifted boxer. He's got so much talent that it'll probably be enough to get him through. But I think it's kind of one of those examples of how the pandemic's worked, really. For some boxers, it's worked perfectly in their favour. It's catapulted some boxers into sort of bigger fights that they weren't expecting. It's kind of given them opportunities they maybe didn't think they were going to get because they've just happened to be in the right place at the right time. The guy that they're after sort of needs a fight or needs a run out, or the opponent they want isn't available. So they get their sort of big opportunities. And we've seen so many boxers that have sort of made the most of that. Whereas, Billy Joe's obviously the flip side of that, whereby the fight he wanted sort of fell through because of coronavirus. It's obviously gone to Callum Smith. And I'm sure in the back of his mind, that'll be sort of frustrating Billy Joe Saunders, the fact that he's seeing Callum Smith going to be heading out there soon to fight Canelo, and he's sort of in the sort of matchroom residency at Wembley Arena against Martin Murray, which isn't the fight that he envisaged. But yeah, you would probably think that Billy Joe Saunders has got too much for Martin Murray, but it is a sort of dangerous one in the fact that it's Murray's last throw of the dice. Really, he's had so many world title shots. It's another world title attempt for him, and for him, it's going to be the biggest fight of his career probably. Whereas for Billy Joe Saunders, it's it's one that he'll probably be looking to just get through and probably forget about and move on to bigger and better things. But I personally can't see. I think Billy Joe will probably have too much quality as the fight wears on, and I see him coming out on top regardless of that. I don't know if you agree.
I do. I think Billy Joe Saunders would have to be considerably below his best, and as I said, Martin Murray would have to be at his very, very best, which is hard to see. It's, it would be a great story for Martin Murray to win a world title. I think there's probably not a person in boxing, maybe apart from Billy Joe Saunders and his team, who wouldn't want him to do that. He drew with Felix Sturm, and he should have won. He went to Argentina and in my opinion, anyway, beat Sergio Martinez, who at the time one of the pound for pound best in the world. In one of the most hostile atmospheres you could ever experience, but didn't get the decision. He lost to Golovkin, fair enough, but Golovkin at his best at that point in time. And then the one he probably should have, I think he lost against Arthur Abraham, but that's the one I suspect that he really looked back on and think that was there to be taken. Even though it was in Germany, I don't think he performed on the night as he should have done. And then it really seemed to be over for him when he lost to Hassan and Dam 2 years ago. He essentially retired, but he's come back, and this week he said he's lost the obsession about winning a world title. He now feels so much better mentally, which is great, but it's just very hard if you look at this fight on paper. It's very hard to see how he wins it, unless Billy Joe Saunders is just a shadow of what he can be. But I also think this is because this fight's really come out of nothing for Martin Murray. He wasn't expecting it. He's come around because of COVID. He's gone around the world, Argentina, Germany twice, Monte Carlo to fight for a world title. He's finally got one in the UK, and it's behind closed doors. And it's just, if he was to win it, it would just be so almost typical. It would just, of course, Martin Murray's finally going to win a world title behind closed doors with no fans in a fight that he's had 8 weeks notice for. It would almost be, he's already got his book out, but he'd have to do another couple of chapters, and it would just be the perfect ending. And I know it gets said an awful lot, but you couldn't write it if that's how it went. But he's 10-1 with the bookmakers, and they don't always get it right. But that is a big price, and Billy Joe 25-1 on for a world title fight between two Brits in Britain. It's just a huge ask, and as much as I'd love to see it, I think he'll fall short once again.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect example of kind of, obviously everyone says there's so much about talent, but so much of boxing's about what's in the head, sort of the mental side of things. And I think it's going to be a big kind of, that's ultimately we're going to see at the end of tonight how those factors have played out. I think boxing wise, you can't really, you look at everything. I think 99.9% of people would agree that Billy Joe Saunders is probably the better boxer, a more talented fighter than Martin Murray. But then, as we've just discussed, sort of, it's not the fight that Billy Joe was after. And Martin Murray's he's probably built himself up so much for all these world title attempts. He's fallen short time and time again. Maybe the fact that this has come out of nowhere, the fact that, there aren't any fans there, it's kind of, there really is nothing to lose for Martin Murray. The pressure's completely off. Whereas Billy Joe Saunders has also got that pressure to, not only win, but look good. And that, is when you start looking beyond an opponent, you start thinking about looking good. Like you think, for example, Anthony Joshua against Andrew Ruiz, that fight was never about if Anthony Joshua was going to defend his world title. It was about whether he was going to put on a show in the US. And we all saw what happened there. So, like I say, I still expect Billy Joe Saunders to win, but you never know when you throw all these sort of psychological factors into play, whether some unusual things could potentially happen, especially behind closed doors, which is kind of a new thing for everyone. Definitely. And as you mentioned Lemieux earlier, and Billy Joe can't keep relying on that performance. You said 3 years ago now, but it's always the one that people bring up. But A, it was a different weight. B, as you say, it was 3 years ago. He does need something just that, bit special more recently. And I mean, obviously, Canelo fighting Callum Smith now could sort of really change his plans, but a good win for Saunders. And if Canelo does come through against Smith, or if Smith wins, I mean, that's a huge British fight next year with fans, 100%. But I think, I don't know. I'm not convinced he will look really, really good, but I think he'll look good enough to beat Martin Murray, probably comfortably on points. I think Murray would have to be pretty badly beaten up to be stopped. I think it'll probably go the distance, the lopsided points. And then I suspect that probably would be the end of Martin Murray after that. And I mean, we'll see how good Billy Joe Saunders
is and can go on to be. That is all from us for today. The show is on Sky Sports. The first couple of fights on YouTube and Facebook, and then I think from either 7 or 7:30 on Sky Sports itself. Hopefully a main event around 10 p.m, which would be a nice change. I'll be back after the show for a recap. Rich and I will be back tomorrow morning to look ahead to Anthony Yarde against Lyndon Arthur for the British light heavyweight title, and also Errol Spence against Danny Garcia. A very important fight through the night in America. Please do join us then. As I said, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We will see you again soon.